And there we are, with the new lighting and everything up. Hey, Tony, and hey, David. Afternoon, everybody. We're into Friday. And hey, so we're here. I hope everybody can hear me well. Everything seems to be lit up green and popping, and everything's going. It's Friday. Yes, it is. That's why I'm here at 4 p.m. Arizona time. Uh, I don't know if everybody's kind of jumping right into stuff. Everybody's kind of spooling in and going on. Hope everybody caught that link I sent to the overnight folks. I did that. Took them in ghost hunting. They gave me a bag of money for that. So it was kind of funny too when we first kind of met up. I'm standing in the parking lot waiting for them, and they all walk by me in the dark. I'm just standing there smoking a cigarette, watching them walk by in the dark. They had no clue, oblivious. So Trevor is doing well. He's in Krakow, Poland right now. So he'll be there. I don't know if he's there for another day or so. He's supposed to move on to Budapest, Hungary here soon. So I don't know when that happens. I kind of follow a little. I hear from him. Man, they serve almost everywhere he goes. It's like it's a bowl of gravy with some meat in it and some bread. The food, to me, he says the food's good, but it just looks like it sucks. It's like, come on, can't get a hamburger somewhere, all that. But for dessert, because he is dairy intolerant, he everyone else gets cake or this or brownie or something for dessert. He gets prunes. So, yes, his allergies have allowed him to not eat some of the finer things and pastries and so forth. So, he's been on the prune diet. Um, I'm glad it was entertaining. It was fun. I played along best I could, and we can talk about it. But Elton and Ginger and Jerry were really fun. The camera crew guys were good. Matt was fine. We had a good time. I did take them in the mountains. We walked in for, I don't know how long, but we put some time on the trail to get them into the mountains. So it wasn't like right off the parking lot or 200 feet from the road. That was my thing. I had a list of places I thought, you know what, I want to do something where they're actually in the superstitions, where there's no radio waves, microwave, cell phone coverage, where it kind of, you know, it was kind of like, let's put them somewhere a little more where it's not the TV thing where you look and find on a map that they weren't that far from the town or anything. I wanted to make sure they went back in, so it worked out pretty good. So they got that, and like I said, we had a good time. It was really nice out. It was just, should have brought a chair because it's just, you stand there and it's kind of, there is a redundancy to it. Well, I was enjoying it. No, I never felt like, why did I go do this? I felt like it was very quiet out. The weather was really nice. I was enjoying it. It was kind of that, and this isn't their fault because this is what they do. It's the incessant jabber. And then if they're not trying to do their little ghost thing seriously, they're just cracking jokes. And that's part of the entertainment aspect. And I get it. And like I said, I played along and all, but I was really kind of enjoying it. I walked off at a certain point. It had been the same thing for so long. So you see at one point had walked off into the dark. And that was just to get off and kind of listen to the night and stuff like that. So I really did enjoy it. I had a good time with them. And spending 3 or 4 hours out there in pitch black darkness in the mountains is cool. And they got to do something a lot of people don't do, is go down the trail, hike through the mountains. There was nobody in the parking lot when we got there, which was what I hoped. It being a weeknight, so it would be the best control version you could have of allowing nothing to happen. I didn't tell anyone where we were going ahead of time. The whole idea was to control that situation. I didn't want anyone to go out there and mess with them or monkey with stuff because it's electronics, so you can very easily. So I did it so at least they would have to rely on what they had to rely on, which is why some of the equipment didn't do nothing for them. Uh, okay, so I was fine. This was the. It was, yeah, it was overnight. They call themselves. They also have another one, TLIF or something. Hey Diana, we'll be. Yeah, he will. Saw Sal and Terry Carter, Moonlight Gathering. Yeah, Sal does his thing with Terry. He likes to go up there and do that. Did Sal say a ghost broke his thumb? Sal says a lot of things. I don't know if a ghost actually broke his thumb. That would seem odd. I think Sal broke his thumb, though. Looks like he got a lot of Arizona sunshine. Yeah, well, it is a lot of sunshine, and it's definitely no. I got the new light set up. This is on the cold. This is not the warm. I'm trying to light things up better in here. So for when we're doing this, I want just things to be a little better and light up. I always feel like things get a little too dark. This might be a little too bright. I don't have a tone system. The idea is in here to have lights that have a fade switch. So until I get there, this was a cheap alternative. So we'll see how it works. We'll do a few of these, and if it works really good, I don't know how long they're supposed to last either, because they're like the charging type of light. So we will see today if I go into the black while we're talking. Home of the Thunder Gods is a special and spiritual place. They say we're going to be safe. Yeah, that was we joked about taking them in, and then part of the thing is to play a little Hollywood script of where they're doing the ghost hunt and I just leave and then they have to find their way out. But because I took them off trail and we had to bushwhack a bit, I thought, man, what if they get turned around a little and don't go the right direction and they're out there for extended time for hours? That wouldn't be funny. So I just decided to stay the day. Now here's the worst part. I worked all day. I took a little nap. I got out, drove all the way out there, waited for them for an hour or two, then got them, took them in the mountains, came out of the mountains, drove for an hour or two home, laid down and slept for an hour or so, and then went to work. So literally there was a 48-hour period. I was almost no sleep and did all that. But again, I had a really good time with those guys. So chest in a cache. I don't know. Cave. Oh, yeah, that was that's out by Tortilla. Someone else called me about that. Ghosts must be afraid of the light. Is the only. Well, that's just. It looks spookier. It's like, they have that spirit box, and I asked Elton. I said, "Why is it?" Off camera we would talk. Occasionally they would cut for a minute. Someone has to go pee or something, and I kept asking him questions. Why do we all wear? Why do you want everybody to wear black? Because it shows more. Everybody in black shows up better than if everybody wore different colors, and they would be darker colors and you would blend into the night too much. It just all enhances and adds to it, much like the spirit box having a demon voice. I said, why don't you just have it have a normal voice, because everybody's going to think, oh, that's and that's part of the thing too. He said, yeah, we did it on a normal voice and people complained and wanted us to change it back. You have to remember, a lot of that stuff is gimmicked. It has a library and you can change the voices. You probably can change the languages depending how much you spend. And because of that, it's basically like a magic trick, a gimmicked magic trick. And so they're able to do that. They go off with cell phones. They go off with flashlights. They can go off with walkie-talkies, all kinds of stuff. So, there's that. So, but like I said, I had a good time. I played along best I could. Tried not to be a bummer about it. Tried to steer them correctly to, if I thought at one point they were talking way into demonology and this stuff, and I said, look, this is kind of the elemental type thing in Native Americans, indigenous people. I don't think you're dealing with the demonic underworld out here and the thing you're being way too Western religion, too Christian on your focus on this stuff. And I said, I think you want to go this route. And I said the other problem was, if anything was really out there, to be honest. It would be speaking in whatever language the Hohokam spoke. It could be speaking Pima, Apache. Where did they learn English? They got a class. I don't know. So there you go. I bet one guy will never forget the choya of the Shin. Yeah, that was, we tried to be really careful. There wasn't much choya there, and he found that one little one. We tried to be careful of the snakes and stuff. One of them almost walked off the cliff. We stopped. They didn't show that on the film, which was funny. Now, I know they have a long clip of it where they show the stuff that they cut, which I would find boring. But I was talking about, I think it was during the Stickman story, and at one point I stopped, and we were discussing it after the fact, and the trail went right, and then up the hill. So I'm in where it turns to the right, and I'm just standing there, and one of the camera guys started walking like northeast, and then I said, "Hey, stop!" And he's like, "What?" I said, "You're walking right off the edge of the cliff," which he was. He was heading right to the edge, and when they had the cameras up, they're just turned and focused on us individually, and yeah, he did not see where he was going. He was going to walk off and just fall. So there was that problem. And then they walk backwards, so you got to kind of be careful. Got a tanning light, definitely bright enough. Well, I can't tone it down much different. It doesn't have a setting to dim. That's what I was hoping. Maybe it does. Hold it, let's see. Okay, let's see here. This one, oh, no, it does. There we go. Maybe that's even better. Okay. Of course, now I looked into the light and I can't see anything. But no, the idea of getting this was we wanted to have a better lighting here. There's no light whatsoever here. It's hard sometimes to read the screens. And remember, we had the glare problems before. But I want fading switches for the room. Because most of the time I'm in here working, I don't really need much light for the keyboards. I know where everything is, and I like the dimmer light for working. It's more relaxing and comfortable. But when we do this, we want some lighting. I did not want the podcast stupid ring light that puts the little rings in your eyes and do any of that stupid stuff. I like the setup we use for the most part here. So that was it. So I will have to continue to adjust and get this where it's a cool light, but it works. It's better. I'm not going to turn them off, but yeah, it was significantly darker. And we have lights for when we do videos, but those are a pain in the butt to stand up, and they would actually have to be out behind me a bit to use those. All right. Have you, and I don't need any sun for a tan. I don't think so. See, it doesn't. I always told Trevor it's funny in these lights until you put someone next to me, you don't realize how dark I am. And I'm definitely got my sun going this year, so I'm getting dark fast. Have you ever seen the 5-finger hand blaze that Mick McPherson shows in his book Memoirs? I'd have to look it up and look at what he's talking about. I'd have to see what it's talking about. There's a lot of blazes and a lot of stuff in the mountains. Nice, Wayne. People need to read about the Apaches before Geronimo. People need to quit thinking. I mean, you get people, and you know, one of my problems with what a lot of I understand, you know, there's the entertainment aspect, an interesting aspect. It's just generally the superstitions. Think in terms of Hohokam, Salado, along the Salt River, and that's your indigenous cultures. The Apaches were in and out of there. That wasn't their land necessarily, their place. The Pima were around surrounding that area and so forth. So you have these different cultures, but principally what you're dealing with in there is the Hohokam, which is not as interesting as the Apache, because the Apache is the well-known thing, and then of course then you have to use what names. You're going to use Geronimo and Cochise, and I doubt that Cochise was running around in the superstitions. But that's, you know, that's marketing and selling, right? So that's why we have Geronimo's cave. I doubt that Geronimo ever was up to that cave. I think from what I was told, there was a little retaining wall with it, back in the 20s or 30s, and I think it was probably a Hohokam thing, and it got ripped apart as time went on, like a lot of things out there. But I think it was not quite what the Rogers ruins are, but it was something similar to that, and you can see it if you're at it. But it's much cooler, and the Dons, I'm sure. I don't know if the Dons had much to do with it or the forestries, but someone realized Geronimo had stories. Let's just make it Geronimo's Cave. It looks fine. Prior to the changing it, the shade was perfect. Don't listen to the people out there. They're crazy. Hi, everybody. Hey, Lazy. So we're all here, and we're doing our thing. It's all about what can make $1. Well, but it's entertainment. I mean, when you're doing something, you got to know where to go. Like the last video, we did a video, and what was that video? It didn't do great. It was the about the murder of the couple, well, the husband and then the wife, and that whole thing. It was like a Star Daily, and it didn't do great. It's a murder mystery story. If my channel was different, maybe it does really well. So it gets and other people have done it, and okay, whatever. I think I do everything better. So we do Star Daily, but then the next one we do gets more views and does pretty well. And then the last one we just did, the James Kidd thing. Again, it's an interrelated Superstition Mountain story. Part of that, I think Tom Collenborn did articles on it and stuff, and I was fortunate enough to get, hold on, where is it? This book. And it was able to give me a lot more details than any articles or anyone else had written about it. So I was able to really add to it, not embellish it, but give further context to everything, which I thought was cool, and a lot of things I'd never heard. And it did good. And then the next one, which I won't tell you, but I think everyone's going to want to hear, and it's going to be very topical again. So they're not always treasure stories, but you have to realize certain things hit better than others. Sometimes you're hearing something you want, people are watching it again and again. Sorry about that. Also to add is like, someone will say, well, your video only did 1,000 and this guy did something similar and he got 5,000. Yes, but remember, in our channel, with the content, with new content each week, we're getting 15 to 20,000 views with new content, not the older videos, but what's coming out this day in the Superstitions and our new content. So we do really, really well. It's just there's a core audience, and then YouTube doesn't always capture everything. I don't know how to explain it, but sometimes there's a lot of views lost on stuff, and a lot of people complain about it, but I don't really care, because the idea is, in general numbers, I can tell we stay really steady. Everything we can tell, there's our audience, here's who watches us, here's how it is, and this is what we do. And we do, I don't know what Trevor told me, 30,000 views a week with older content and newer content, which is split. And he gives me those numbers, and then I just listen to it, and I go, oh, it's pretty cool. So there. But everyone's doing it to make $1. I don't make anything on this. Trevor takes the money for this. I told him, because he has to put the time editing on most everything, and there's physical end of it that he has to do. I just got to sit and talk, look up some stuff, and I enjoy that. I don't get a dime out of this. I wouldn't think it wouldn't bother me if we had 5 million subscribers and I was doing 1 million views a week, and it was significant money, even though it would be only temporary. I'd probably just say, okay, I want a percentage of something, but for me, it's not worth the tax stuff and all that, dealing with it at the end of the year. Did that woman just call me crazy? Oh yeah, let's start stuff up, because there's nothing like being stupid on a Friday. I mean, the way history is just, but that's always been, everybody does that. I just ordered the book on Amazon, $14. Good. Yeah, it's you'll know what I've said about it. I think on the video I talk that the court case stuff, you kind of he gets too much into about the soul in these guys, and they're kind of, to me, charlatans because they're just after the money, you know. Nothing ever seemed to resolve, far as, you know, who was it who got the money. The Barrel Institute had to give the money back, and then the psychic group got it, and yeah, I don't think they ever came up with anything. So, you know, they just were absorbing someone's money. I always felt like James Kidd did it tongue-in-cheek. Hello, Wayne and everybody. Hello. Many. Don't do that. Okay. You want to do that, then you get this. Then you have to be like made to go away. And do you really want to go away and be stupid? Let me ask you that, huh? Let me ask you, do you want to go away and be stupid? No, you don't, okay? So we're not going to have the arguments and do the fighting, okay? So just be nice. If you don't want to be nice, you know what happens, right? Okay, so just be nice. Yeah, he wants to be the asshole. So, anyway, so I had a great time with the overnight folks, and you know, I wasn't the butthead about going into, oh, this is how this really works, this is how this really works. There was a pack rat climbing around by the musical box, so I thought that was what probably set it off a bunch of times. But I just tried to play it cool. I know they got a big audience, and just be do you not know how to be kind and nice? If you can't be kind and nice, then be gone. It's that easy. See, I'm giving you opportunity and chance. You should give others the equal opportunity and chance. Getting back to the fun stuff, what's your favorite Super Gold story? I don't know if there's a favorite, because I like so much of this stuff. I just really enjoy this stuff. There are stories I know can't be true, and I enjoy those stories because they're just great storytelling. There are stories that there's stories that are possibly 50-50 on the honest truth line. Nobody's playing with you. So there you go. Nobody else is talking. So there you go. You're getting close. Walking that little edge on the precipice on the cliff. Why would you do that? Don't be a troll. Just roll with it. On a different roll. No, did Waltz meet Julia Forrest? No, because I don't think Julia was in town. He did that around 1880, 1881. And Julia didn't come into town until probably 1896, 1897. Somewhere around then is when her and her husband, Emil Thomas, came. So no, she did not know him before that. The Stars were people, they were from Germany, and they were probably friends with Waltz. He was definitely friends with Andrew. And that's how that worked. I think culturally, definitely back then, but even today in some places, people from a specific ethnic culture will stick together, and I think that was it. And unfortunately, later, Andrew's dead. Waltz outlives him, and Jacob took advantage of it and helped keep Jacob's head above water, because selling Waltz's property off in parcels really helped him out. Have you ever hiked around Barclays Canyon and in and around back in the 80s? So you're talking about Barkley Basin and Barks Canyon? That's what I'm hoping you're talking about. Yes, that was one of my big grounds. I always went in through Cardiac and in through Barks Canyon, past Miller's mines down in there. I never liked the Miner's Needle routes through Barkley Basin. I always liked jumping right in and dropping down into Barks Canyon and going that way towards Bluff Springs and Needle Canyon. That was my main routes if I was on the southern end. Hey, Wayne. Back on my California schedule. Was in Illinois for a week. Saw the Cubs sweep. Yeah, the Cubs are doing good. Man, the Cubs are doing good. They scare me. They have no pitching, but the Cubs are doing good. I'm very sad because Wednesday is the start of the Stanley Cup and there was no Blackhawks hockey. So, but I do always watch the Stanley Cup. So while we'll watch some baseball. Yeah, right now, this time of year, the Stanley Cup playoffs is a big thing to me. I think I talked about it in the past, but yeah, so I'm watching the Cup. So it's the Oilers and the Florida Panthers. So rematch from last year. We'll see what happens this year. Everyone give Wayne a thumbs up. See, thank you. I think that I could make it just fine at Wayne's house. It's always 5 o'clock. Yep, there it is. Yeah, Trevor's, like I said, he's in Krakow. Let's see, it is roughly 4:30 here, so it's 9 hours different, so it's about 1. Yeah, that'd be about 1:30 in the morning there. He's asleep. So he's sleeping away. Get up in the morning, and he'll be doing a tour of Krakow, Poland. And then, like I said, he goes on from there. It's on to Budapest. And I don't know where he goes after that. I only he sends me shots of his lunch and dinner and breakfast, which is, I'm not. There was food that looked good, but you know what? I will tell you this. When you look at American dinners and American meals, and then you compare it to a lot of European dinners and meals, I mean, we have it made. It's so much better here. A steak dinner and baked potato and stuff in the fix-it, man. Europe does not understand. Is there any documentation about how much money Goltz no, there's bits and pieces, and some of it is basically second, third hand stories. He paid this guy in gold concentrate. There's some of that. I think Thomas Glover's book, The Golden Dream, tries to take stock of some of that without using some possible documentation we're not sure of, but he tries to keep track of certain things. The most Walt seemed to spend was when he tried to help out Julia, which Julia talked about. So it's hard to say how much he spent and if he sent some to his sister, which people doubted that story for a long time. But then it was the Howlands. Ray and Lizzie went and visited Julia, and Lizzie and them actually did a great thing, started talking about things that normally people don't talk about. And Julia talks in one interview, Lizzie talks about how Julia said she'd look for Walt's sister's address. She had it because Waltz gave it to her to make sure she would notify her of his death, which she did. And she said, I still have the address somewhere. I'll make sure I get it for you. Hey, Dallas, what's up? So we don't really know. We know there's an amount, and it's over a period of time. That's from that second cash. And we know he paid with gold concentrate for some of the outbuildings done and other things. What did he need? Yeah, we have no idea. And people, you got to remember, I don't think anybody was paying much attention to him until after he died. Things happened out there, and there were certain things, but there wasn't a lot to spend money on. But what he did spend the money on, we don't know. So that's one of those things that nobody thought. What was it? The Grijalva family who lived near him, and then Julia's in-laws. I can't remember his name right now. Anyways, her former brother-in-law, made statements. They were surprised that Waltz would have had anything because they thought he just lived kind of plain and simple and all. So it's hard to judge because he, I know we hear there's the books that have the thing where Waltz was out drinking all the time and buying all the children's shoes and all this, the Holmes crap and all that kind of stuff. And when you hear all that, but then you look at the reality of the people that knew him and the people that lived near him, he was pretty cagey. He understood the problem of what was going on. So, yeah, he paid off those debts, obviously. And we know there were debts, and things were shaky because if you go in the county recorder's books, you'll see that Reinhardt betrayed Julia for certain monies and other things, signed everything into Reinhardt's name, which was a form of hiding, trying not to go bankrupt. And so when Emil left, they obviously were in dire straits, and it's down to the salt and pepper shakers and the chairs and everything she had. She was trying to make sure that it was in Reinhardt's name so her creditors couldn't go after her for the money or her things and shut her down. And they survived that, but she survived very well. And then, was it 1892, ended up selling off all her inventory and everything. So she survived that crisis. And it seems odd that, she would have been able to do it without someone helping out, because she kind of turned it around pretty quick. He had to go back in the mountains. No, Waltz's reasoning was he didn't expect to live as long as he did. And when he paid off Julia's debts and then realized his house and everything's gone, he has what he has left. So it's like, crap, now I got to start over. So, and Julia probably needs help, and Julia's helping him and taking care of him. So I think he realized, okay, we need to get this to get things back on track, because we're going to need that and, all this. So I think that was the thought processes of like, okay, you know what, we'll be able to get things back on solid ground in the business and stuff. I don't think he had any intention of her like losing her business, selling it. She had a house, she had a business. I think he saw, okay, this will get everybody in a good position, make us partners, basically. But the gold, remember, the gold was under his bed, Reinhardt, and then several cases, Reinhardt said simply, the gold under the bed was to be Waltz's. That was always, or Julia's. Waltz always said that was to go to Julia, and then when they got to the camp and got the cash, that would be split up, and then the mine, he would kind of show him where the mine was, and that was for whatever he and Julia wanted to do to dispose of it. So, does a person's perception of brightness determine? Okay, so now you want to. So Waltz realized he's gonna be needing more gold. Well, he realized it because he helped Julia out, and he didn't expect to live. Think about it. Almost everyone Waltz knew that he traveled with from California into Prescott, into Phoenix, everybody's dead. Waltz is one of the few old timers left. So I don't think Waltz, he didn't have family or anything, so I think he just didn't have anyone to take care of things. And he realized, okay, Julia and Reinhardt, from Germany and stuff, so that was his new German friends, like the Stars were at one time. And I think that's all it was. I think people try to blow a lot of things in the story and documentation out of proportion, but I think as he's sitting there thinking, okay, we need more gold. There's more. Where do I have more gold? Well, if we're going to go out, we might as well grab what I got up there. And he wasn't telling them, I'm going to make us millionaires. He said, we'll get this other gold I got up there, and I'll tell you where the mine is, but I just want to make sure we're good on this here. Because I don't think Waltz was going to be able to work the mine. He made it sound like none of them would be able to be physically able to work it. They weren't miners, and he was in no condition to do so. So I think that's kind of where his head was at. Let's get the cash. I'll show you where the mine's at, and so you guys can figure it out, what you want to do. Because maybe he realized, they might be able to make a little money off of telling someone where that's at. But I think his main thing was, how much longer does he have to live, right? And if he's going to be in Julia's care and so forth, that was what I think he was working towards, is like, okay, I'll be with Julia, and Reinhardt can be there, and they can run the business and care for me. And he wasn't in great health, but I'm sure he was healthy enough that December before the floods. Oh, when did the what? Railroad. Oh, curious. I don't think the railroad was in there quite then. And by his place, I don't know of any railroad tracks by. I know here's a way to look at Phoenix. Phoenix was built out of adobe and wood, and the adobe houses held up pretty good. The wood ones burned down all the time, and then the railway started coming in around the late 1800s, early 1900s, and that's when if you go look at the existing structures of a lot of houses, there's a certain period you see everything bump because they were able to get brick and manufacture brick, and the railroad came through. So I would think it was that. I don't remember. I used to know exactly when, but the railway, the railroad came through at that time. Julia's house wasn't on the railroad originally. It wasn't running behind her house when she was there. I don't know if she was gone. It was probably there after Waltz, but there. From Anderfer's property. Appears he was practically broke. Well, he wasn't broke because he had the horses and he had the other things. He stayed on the property and he always had paid his taxes. There was several outbuildings there, and it depends because you hear two different stories of 1 and 2 room adobe home that had shutters, and they were locking shutters with a locking door, which was always noted because it was unusual. He was one of the most people just had a blanket or something hanging down at the front door. You have to do certain. It's like when Julia and Albert Schaefer sold her house on Jackson. They did the $10. It's $10, and they conveyed it. They didn't sell the house for $10. They sold the house to somebody, and that was worked out. They received far more than $10 for the house. But that's what's left in the recorder. So all the property transfers back then would be $10, $20, $50. It doesn't mean the value. That was some cash that they were given for the legal transfer and stuff. So Waltz's property was well over worth $50. And they know that, but he could not work it and couldn't do anything. And so that was kind of how that worked, is like, okay, whatever the value was, the value to Waltz was for you to kind of let me live here and take care of it, which there's people today who do that. You buy my place, and we have an agreement, and it'll be agreement for $10 or $20, but the agreement basically is you're paying me this much money for something, significantly more, so we can avoid a lot of other entanglements. And I get to live here until I die. And then there's personal property, which goes to the family. And then there's the general property, which you get to take on hand. And then you handle all that stuff. And then when I die, my family just gets whatever they're supposed to get. And you do this. And that happens a lot today. I know several instances of people where there's a deal set in place before they die. And when they die, it's not a gentleman's agreement. There's an agreement made, and certain money changes hands. So 16th and Grant, there's a railroad under the bridge. Yeah, there was. Yeah, okay. There's been a railroad there for a long time, but yeah, there was. I don't think there was. The railroad wasn't coming through there, because it goes right behind Julia's property. And it's, God, what is it? It's not on her property, but I would say it's within 40 yards, 50 yards at the back of her property she lived at. I don't think that was there. I think that came in. It was around that time or afterwards, but the railroad came in, because that was a big change in Phoenix until the railroad came in. When the railroad came in, they were able to get much more bulk and services and so forth. Like I said, I walked every square inch downtown, and there are a lot of original adobe houses from the 1880s and 1890s, and there's very few wooden structures left from the 1890s. Most of them burned down. There's some over by the 17. A few were restored and moved from their original places, but a lot of that was because once a fire broke out, it pretty much was going to gut the whole neighborhood and block, because it was a hot desert. There wasn't a lot of water, and there was a lot of problems, and yeah, everything would just go up in a flash. I don't know what Julia's house structure. That's one of the curious things I've always been kind of wondered about. There's a lot of photographs and families throw a lot of stuff out, but I've always wondered if there was a picture of Julia's house, because they talk in the newspapers about a lot of stuff happening there, but there seems to be no physical photographs of that corner and that street, Jackson, at that time. It's now a parking lot, but yeah, it would be cool to kind of see what it looked like. And even then, let's see, she left. The house was still there about 1917 to 1920, so the house was still there. So it's kind of hard to believe that there was no physical evidence of the house, even though the structure and other structures were there. Waltz's place was still there in the 10s or 20s, because a number of different people, I think the Tovreas and other people, talked about how the ruins from his adobe house were still there. The ruins broke down in the flood, but the kind of structure, one of the boys talked how they used to have lunch there when they worked the fields. They would go over to Waltz's old adobe and sit there and by the walls. And that was their lunch spot. So, but nobody thought that was historical at the time. That was just another old guy, farmer guy, who died, and there was stories about him, like we hear stories when we're growing up in the neighborhood. And then I think now they would be like, holy crap, that got out of control. So did Jacob take gold ore to the bank in cash and then pay her bills there's different discussions that he probably spread it around and did concentrate, broke it up, and then went different places and paid some of the bills and got, you would get like a receipt for this much that would count like cash. Like, here, I have a chit that's worth this at this store, and you would use that. And I'm thinking he spread it around, tried to make sure nobody knew where all this was coming from. It was probably him and Reinhardt. There's a story of there's several stories of that, and that's probably what they did over because that makes sense with Walt saying, get your bills together, being able to go over everything, and then say, okay, this is how we'll pay this off in increments and get it done. So I think it was handled a series of different ways, not to draw a lot of attention. So you're taking money with Peter, and then you're getting something from Peter, and you're trading in, and you're taking Peter's thing to Paul, and then giving it to Paul, and Paul's getting this, and then you're slowly working where nobody's going, hey, Waltz was in here and he was cashing in an awful lot of gold to pay some bills. I'm sure they did it in a way, because he never seemed to get, like I said, when he died, a lot of people that knew him said he didn't have a penny. He was penniless. He had nothing, but we know he had the ore, and Julia was able to utilize it. We know certain things worked a certain way, but how many of those people knew him in the 1870s when he was doing all right? That is a problem too. A lot of people that knew Waltz probably around 1889, 1890 knew him as this kind of reclusive old man. Okay, everybody's kind of going da 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 da. The post office is over there, a little neighbor in Phoenix. The church was around. Julia had a boarding house as well as the bank. Well, I think a boarding house is just she had people that stayed in the house. So, yes, they were money laundering, basically, in a way, in a fraction way. They were finding a way to transfer the money that nobody knew quite where it was going. And I'm sure that's how he worked. He would use gold. He wouldn't have a rock with gold. He made sure they broke the gold down into concentrate. And, people didn't know where it came from. And yes, when people would question about the gold, I used to prospect, But I think he was savvy. I don't think he was stupid. Too many people, and including himself, got ripped off over time, so that was very important. There is still an old Dobie on Rio Salado Street. Yeah, but that's way after the fact. One of the oldest adobes is down, and I don't even know how much of it's left. It was down in the area of probably the avenues around 5th, 4th, 3rd Avenue. Somewhere around there. And it's just in this little vacant lot. And there's not much. I got pictures of it. But it was one of the oldest structures I could find existing that hadn't been worked. There's nothing really much left of it, just some of the walls. But it's fallen apart. And I went in and took pictures of it. Yeah, I had the opportunity working to cover every square inch of downtown. So what I would do is I knew my route, and it was a lot of it was walking route and stuff. And so since I was going through a neighborhood, I would look up in the assessor's office and look at how old houses were and what year they were built and so forth. And I kept track of things and took pictures and was really trying to kind of look at the older houses and the structures and the properties and kind of learn that. So I did that a lot because I was trying to see what were some of the oldest structures left. So you get in that area, there's still quite a few structures. Some of the stuff on Washington, there's some of the buildings like Julia's old store, and some of those are some of the original. They've been adobeed or cemented over or plastered over, but some of the original brickwork and stuff is in there. But I did my due diligence because it wasn't just being on the street level. I was in the alleys, I was on the private property. So I was just definitely taking pictures. There's thousands of pictures of when I was down there, just taking pictures, looking at things, and trying to look at archival stuff and kind of look at what was still existent from original Phoenix. And there's very, very little of it. And part of it was there was adobe, which couldn't last forever, and then there was the wood structures. Until the brick came, everything would burn down quite a bit. I've never been able to find much about Julia's stuff. There's still an adobe house. I can't wait if we hit that. Walt's knew enough to keep his yapper shut. Well, yeah, I'm sure he did, because you just couldn't trust people. I think he trusted who he trusted, and that was that. So I think he was a very cautious, and he learned to be cautious because the Star thing, Jacob Star, was not taking care of him the way Andrew would have. He learned a lesson there. I think, we had the guy that was kind of claim jump his property. Just things happen, and you just more and more go, okay, you know what? People don't have my best interest. They have their interests involved, and that happens today so often. Is there's people that you think you can trust that come into your life or come into people's lives, and you think all is good, and then everything starts to change once there's a payoff, and it's just like they see there's a payoff and whatnot happen, and then they turn on each other too. That's the other thing. Sometimes they start lying and turning on each other, where you never know the truth of exactly what happened. Anybody ever wants, and then I know there's supposed always to be this book about it, but Chuck Crawford, that was such a mess with everyone involved in that, because that became, there are 1,001 stories of this guy turning on this guy, and this guy doing this, and this guy doing that, and you could sit and listen to 5-6 different people and end up with 6 different entirely different stories of what was transpiring. And that was just horrible. And that was, maybe people didn't always have the worst interests at heart, but it just, you almost don't know how to listen to anybody in that whole story process, because none of it makes sense. I mean, they all hey, there you go. Hey. But no, that happens a lot to people, and I'm sure that happened to Waltz. He learned over time, and every time, that, and I think they tried to use that a little. I mean, obviously, Holmes tried to use it as like Julia was, because of the religious thing. Once he realized she went off the end a little, which was pretty typical. I mean, if let's say you were raised in a Methodist church, in pretty quiet rural area, not much, it was just a normal, and then you meet someone who's a Seventh-day Adventist, or someone who's a Jehovah's Witness or a Mormon, and you go and see what they're doing, it's like, what? It's so different, because you've never been exposed to that. So always, when you're looking at things, people always look at stuff, they're looking from the outside in, without a lot of background and making judgments. Do you think Bob Corbin has any notes Yeah, I'm sure Bob. Well, I'm sure Tom used a lot of that stuff up, but yeah, Bob had a lot of stories. He used to come to the rendezvous and tell stories. He used to sit there and talk about a lot of their trips and stuff. It was kind of sad, is that early on in the rendezvous, Bob would show up, and Bob would sit around and talk with everybody and tell stories. Now, Bob and Tom would meet and hang out and tell stories, but Bob showed up and talked a lot and told stories, but then because of a number of things that transpired, Bob, in health wise and distance, wasn't coming to the rendezvous as much, and then Tom was coming and talking. And Tom wasn't always a sit around the campfire, share a lot of stories. He would with a small group of friends. But with 25 of us, Tom was very quiet. He just laid back. People would ask him things and he'd talk, and he had his canned answers for stuff. But Bob was pretty forthcoming about stuff and different things. But again, we were very fortunate. I think Greg Davis, I'm sure, recorded or taped a lot of those conversations. So, but Bob was separately had his own trips and his time in the Superstitions from Tom, with Celeste Jones, Ed Piper, and people he knew and he'd been searching. So they ended up connecting, and that was kind of the thing in the 70s. So the two of them ended connecting and having a really good friendship and spending a lot of time back in the back country. Tom was always interesting in that, because if you could get him rolling, you could get him rolling. But he didn't tell you 1,001 different tales. He would usually kind of talk about someone, and then you get a lot about that information, and then the next time you might hear something about something else. But Tom was more cagey, I would say, would be the word for it. He would talk, and he didn't want to get in arguments. He didn't care to have a discussion about the stuff. He if someone was being stupid or saying something stupid, Tom would just be like, yep, you must be right, you're done, I'm done. And that was kind of the way he was. So people, I don't know why, as crazy as this sounds, is we would be sitting around, and I didn't understand why some people didn't give Tom the ultimate respect he deserved. And they didn't always. They would give it to Clay. Nobody would interrupt or try to tell Clay differently. Rarely it would happen. Someone did, everybody would give them the stink eye and they would shut down. Bob was similar. Maybe being the former state attorney general and the president of the NRA had something to do with it. But big old tall old Tom, man. Tom was the one you would have thought been like, what was Tom, 6'4", 6'5"? But Tom would have been the one you would have thought people would be the most respectful to. He had everything, as tall as he was, but yeah, it just never was that way. I'd hear people just be like, so why would you say that, Tom? I was like, well, why would you do that? It would have been great to have met Tom's dad, George. Yeah, he died in the 60s. Tom didn't talk about him much either. So those of us, and Frank knew him really well. There's other people. It's odd because he would talk about certain things with certain people. He was not a big about his personal life person, and I was just fortunate that we had enough certain common elements that we could talk about things, and that was between us. And I didn't realize it till after he passed. I didn't understand the full weight of that, so it was kind of like, but I always remember he'd be talking to you and then he'd give you that look and just kind of stare at you from the side eye, and then he'd be quiet for a while, and then he would kind of work it out, and then he would talk to you about something. But yeah, he shared a lot with Frank at times and different people. Tom was also a prankster, so if you think everything Tom was telling you was the God's honest truth, you're gotta be kidding yourself, because he was full of himself at times. Okay, I was looking at what time we're at. But yes, he could really pull the wool. He caught me a couple times off guard, and I was kind of like, had to sit back, and then I kind of was like, You weren't serious about that, were you? And then and then I'd see the look in his eyes. I'd be like, man, but he could get you. And he liked doing that to people. He really liked messing. There's a few stories. Someday, God, there's a couple people I'd love to sit with and talk about that, because he loved to stir the pot and get everybody and he thought it was so funny to go in and be like, someone talks crap about this person, so he'd feed that fire and feed this fire. He thought that was hilarious. Get everybody worked up. Do you think he was close to finding the LDM? I don't think he'd looked for the LDM or had any real reason to truly look for it for a long time. Tom was well off and did very well for himself. He could make people mad about it and stuff like that. I know I'd heard him a couple times, just if he didn't want to talk about stuff and he was tired, and you got to imagine he had to be tired about it sometimes, because it's the same. Eventually, it's going to be the same dozen questions, the same things over and over and over. And I get it. But then he'd be like, well, I don't even know if the Dutchman ever really had a mind. And that's a way to end things. What do you mean, Tom? I have to question some of those stories and all. He was good at it. And when he did it, man, it was like he just dropped a freaking boulder right on it. That wasn't for teasing. That was just sometimes, and he got some people upset at times with things he'd say. But I think there is a thing of getting tired, I've been at the rendezvous where you come in, and then by the second night, and we get the guest speakers that second night, we get in the evening, sometimes I'm talkative about the Dutchman, and then sometimes I'm kind of like, between all the Talk Friday, all the stuff I've done in the week prior, all the guest speakers, everything I've heard and flooded and soaked in, all the questions I've asked, it's like, let's talk about where we can buy this best steak dinner, because I'm just done for a moment. There's only so much percentage I can take. And it's, like I said, it can be the same 12 questions. And how many times can you tell someone the same thing over and over and over before you're just like, man, I've told no matter what I do, I got to repeat myself again and again and again. And sometimes it's the same people over and over and over. So, yeah, never let truth get in the... Well, I'm different in that respect. I think you should I think you should stay as close. There's differences. I think I can tell a good story, but I always try to preface it as if I don't really know, or this is what we're told. I try to do it in a way that if I'm trying to be accurate or document something, but I prefer trying to hope the legacy I leave is a lot of stuff. This is what I was told. This is what this is. That's what I hope, is that I get it straightened out a little. You can't get it all straightened out, but I get it straightened out a little. There's other people tell stories and say things that are completely wrong, and people go on with the mess of other lies and BS, and I really don't like that, because I don't think you can say, well, it was a good story, it was entertaining, but there are people that put themselves out in the mountains and risk their lives because of someone else's BS. And if you haven't spent your time in the mountains, if you're not that guy, and you're feeding people misinformation and just can try to blow it off as entertaining for a few bucks, that's wrong. I mean, no one's going to say I sent them into the mountains during the summertime in the heat and stuff because I thought it was a good idea. I'm very straightforward and honest about things, and I will tell. Yeah, so I really am very careful. I know Ron Feldman wouldn't, Bob Schuss wouldn't. A lot of people are very, hey, we we'll tell you what we believe, and we will talk about certain things, but none of them are sending you out there ill-prepared, misprepared, and that's important, because nobody wants to see something bad happen to someone, but people who really don't care, and that's unfortunate. I know that are you saying Thomas Glover? He didn't burn a lot of his stuff, but I believe he buried a lot of stuff in the mountains. You talking about Thomas Glover? Ted DeGraw? Are you talking Ted DeGraw? No. Ted Cox, I don't know. Ronnie found it and nobody gave it to Jesse. Ronnie, I don't know. Who are you talking about? TG. Is that you're saying Ted Cox burned stuff? Thomas Glover, he buried it. Ted Cox stuff. There's so much of that around. Ted, if you've ever read Todd Cox's stuff, come on, give me a break. I read some of it, and then I read some more of it, and then it gave me a headache, and I didn't want to copy any more stuff. And then I asked Tom about Ted Cox because he knew Ted Cox, and he explained to me, and that was the end of me reading Ted Cox's stuff. So, if you're saying Thomas Glover, I've never heard of him burying anything. Ted, so you're saying Ted Cox's stuff? You have Ted buried stuff. I could care less. I have zero interest in most of Ted Cox's stories and things. That was just by me reading stuff, and I found it very similar to other people's stuff, and I noticed there's a certain pattern, and I found his writing and what he was doing was similar to Dos Lucas and was similar to Crazy Jake, and there were certain things that I was seeing a lot of similarities in and patterns, and then I was just the Peralta leather map, which one? Peralta leather map, which one? The only one the Frank Fish map. That map, I think, is a genuine article. Is it the Superstitions? Probably. Let's say possibly. But that's the only one I know of that you can trace most of the history to it, and we actually have the real thing still. I have a lot of problems with a lot of maps where you're trying to track down what happened to them, where they were. Adolf Ruth didn't take the original maps with him. Oh, he did take the original maps with him. Oh, they found his maps, but it was a topo map. Oh, stuff shows up, or there's a pattern to things. And then they say, oh, here's an original Adolf Ruth map. Here's the original. Oh, but it's in English. The one in Jake Cruzen currently has. I don't know who Jake Cruzen is. All I know is the Frank Fish map. I know that one. There's another one you'd have to share with me privately because there's one that was stolen. And if it is that one, I don't think that one's made out of leather though. There was a leather map found in Texas that was fake. I know that one, but yeah, there was one that was stolen, but I don't know if it's in leather. I think it was on paper, and it's missing. So that might not be good. You put his name out there because if that's the one, and man, there would be some serious consequences to pay on that all the way. Yeah, that's how people disappear, man. That stuff. I don't know why. If you see something physical and you can look at it, take a picture of it, why do you need it? There you go. Ted DeGrazia. Okay, so it was Ted DeGrazia, but he buried the paintings and stuff. He didn't have a lot of research. He searched the mountains for the Dutchmen and stuff, but he liked to ride them. I don't think he was a Dean Dutchman guy. I think he was a love to ride the mountains, kind of head in the clouds. He loved the mountains, and he spent a lot of time, but I don't know. I've never gotten the sense that he was like the diehard Dutch hunter. I always got the sense that he really enjoyed the mountains. He enjoyed the search and the chase. He enjoyed the company of his companions and what he did in the mountains. But it was always... I think he found it beneficial, but I think he liked being in the mountains. So if you were looking for someone that was kind of a Dutch hunter, and the person that would have been best to talk to on that in depth about how much DeGrazia was interested in finding the Dutchman or anything like that would have been Tom, because Tom and Ted were friends and talked, and Tom would have given you a good idea. Ted, I'm sure, bounced ideas off of Tom, but Tom could have given you a good idea of if Ted was really, really looking, or if Ted was a guy that liked to be on the mountains. Which, for your online work, which music video program I don't know. That would be a Trevor answer. Trevor uses, well, he uses RAW. He's using CFast cards with the 4K, so it's all RAW footage that he does. So, he colorizes, and it looks a mess when he films. It doesn't look like what we do. So he doesn't use a music video program. I know has several different things he uses for editing. But I know it's through the CFast card. He needs a lot of hard drive space to do that stuff. And then I work with Pro Tools. So most of the stuff he gets audio from me, even though we're using the audio everything we do audio is separate, so we're using the Zoom stuff to record audio, and then anything I deal with, the music or any audio I mess with, I'm using Pro Tools, and then he's using what he's using, which I don't know what program it is, because I don't know why he doesn't use my stuff. But he's not I'm more an audio engineer, and he learns a bit from me, because he's very surprised at how much as how he can manipulate film, I can manipulate audio in the way of take a stick and bang a stick and shake a can of beans, and then it comes out sounding really fantastic, like with all this depth, and man, that's amazing. I know how to work that magic on the audio end. Trevor knows the video end, but I do not know what he uses, and I don't know how to bring his stuff up. But yes, there's a whole, I don't think you can see them. Okay, you can see some of them, but there's a whole bunch of hard drives. There's hard drives everywhere he stores stuff on. And I know everything is separate, audio and visual, and the 4K stuff goes into the CFast cards, which have much more limited capability of storing stuff. How do they know Dutchmen? They actually even mine next to each other up on the Colorado. Where is it? I'm trying to remember the name of the town on the Colorado. We're almost out of time, but I'm trying to remember the name of that town. Not Yuma, but the place. Who else was that? Ah, man. See, it gets later in the day. I need food to remember these things. But no, it's they actually, Waltz was working with some guy on a claim there, and Rivas was within 50, 100 yards of them there. They probably crossed paths a couple times, and before that and all, and think about it, the population was completely different. There was less people, so being some old timers out in the mountains in different areas, they crossed each other in town or something. Let's see. Thanks. I'm looking about trying Reaper. That's not what Trevor uses, though. Appreciate the good info. Thanks a lot, Crown King. But yeah, when Trevor's in, I think somewhere in our video, I don't know, he talks about some of it. But I'll have to sit down with him and do like a midweek thing where we just had talked to him about the different shows. He shows some of what he's doing and all. I know he uses a lot of different things because in teaching, the state only provides them certain things, so he has a hard time in dealing with the state. Everything he deals with over that side of the room is Macintosh, so that's the Mac side of the room, and this side's Windows. So that's a difference between us two. He's all Mac in what he does, and I'm all Windows over here. And it does, everything does work together. But yeah, I know he used Adobe for a long time. Most of the stuff that he uses, I will say this, is I find there are people that use the stuff, and I find that they really swear by it. They're like, oh my god, yeah, people are so stupid they don't use this stuff, and this is such a great program and stuff. It's funny what he does do, and then there's people out there that use other things, and Trevor will show me, like, I'm not going to talk whose channels. At channels, they use really crappy editing software, and he shows me what they're doing and how it's not really doing what he does. He shows me, and I look at it, and then I see all these flaws that I wouldn't see. You don't see. We don't see it. But Trevor's peeling back and showing me all this stuff and going, it's just so second rate. And it's really weird. because he knows that much and he went through that stuff. So now he's really trying to. The problem is, it's like anything, it's always going next generation, and he's trying to stay on track with that, teaching and educating kids. He was very disappointed when he got into college, his first year at NAU, when he was working on his bachelor's many years ago now. He was surprised how many kids didn't even know how to operate properly a camera to film. He was having to show second and third year students how to operate and work the cameras when they were filming and what they could do. And then there was people, Tyler had the same problem with people. They would film footage and they were filming it all wrong and using all the wrong settings and calibrating things wrong, and it really was frustrating to him. They came from a really good program, but they were really interested in learning the technology and how all the mechanical operations of equipment, which is important. Just because you know how to turn it on and how to do something a certain way, it definitely isn't, and that's what these videos and this whole thing helped Trevor do. Is I always hoped it would teach Trevor to film and do different things and experiment with all of us, and that's how he ended up coming up. I've gotten so many compliments of people that watch sunsets and say, I didn't realize, but there is some of the filming in that's so awesome. That was Trevor, man. He was, it was the stuff that was sub really was way different than what he got, but yeah, he got some great footage through that. Nice show. Go eat. Drink to Mr. Ward. Drink to Mr. Ward, to Bob Ward, Dr. Ward, and the crew in Poland. Pizza or Chinese? Tonight's pizza. I'm doing the pizza tonight. Have a great weekend, everyone. Another great episode. Thank you, everybody. Keep watching. Look to Monday. Everybody, look for Monday. Monday should be a good one. Let's keep the BS comments down to a minimum on that one. But everybody enjoy that, because that'll be something very special that we were given an opportunity to do, that I felt very fortunate that we got to do and put out there for everyone, and everyone understand with recent circumstances here locally why we're doing it now. So there you go. Yes, you're so late to the party. Everybody's leaving the party. Yes, we'll be playing guitars. Was a little earlier and will be tonight because I got something I got to finish. So thank you, everybody. Catch Chasing Legends on Mondays. Really cool one coming up this Monday. Catch us live on Fridays. Always kind of catch our daily This Day in the Superstition Mountains, and we will get going. Damn guitars. They're not damn. They're just guitars. There's no reason to insult them or make them feel bad. Because when they feel bad, then they act up. You're all good. You're all good. Keep it down, boys. Anyways, good to see everybody. Thank you, everyone. We're going to get out of here. I'm going to get out of here, pick up some groceries, and I'm going to be back at you. Well, come Monday, but definitely next Friday. Thank you for joining us. And